Welcome to our Conscious Leaders Forum. I'm going to be facilitating this. This is our second monthly call, which is at high noon on the Eastern Standard Time on the East Coast. And I'm real excited. I just came off of being with a group of leaders that are helping lead the movement to really make conscious change in ourselves and create health and well-being. And had an opportunity to talk a lot about some of the things we're going to talk about today. I've added some special things because I want to make sure that as we develop this and work together, that we kind of have a common language that we're working from. So really, what is a conscious leader forum? Well, forum is a place, meeting, or medium where ideas and views on a particular issue can be exchanged. And so the idea here is to kind of build this culture where we're working on ourselves and helping others awaken themselves and become more conscious. Today, I'm going to spend time really talking about what is our consciousness, because it's very confusing. I mean, it's interesting because interpersonal neurobiology, Stanford University, PET scan, CAT scans, far infrared scans, the ability to look at the brain, the ability to assess with warm imaging, where certain areas of the brain light up. We've learned a lot about the brain, and yet the corpus callosum, which kind of puts the brain right smack in half, each side of the brain has certain things it does and actually has its own consciousness. So it's kind of wild, but we can't really define that. So how we define consciousness has to be an individual thing. It has to be about us as one person, because basically you can't describe what's going on in someone else's head. We put a lot of stuff in our own heads, and we're going to talk about that as well today. But consciousness really has to be experienced and understood through the observer, through ourselves individually. So, we always ask the question, who are we? Well, we're not our things. So if you say, well, I'm a lawyer or I'm a doctor, that's not who you are. That's your occupation. And so we identify with things to give us foundation. And we're going to talk about how our thoughts and our feelings, how that works, and really what consciousness is if we really distill it down to how it works for us. Because whether the corpus callosum separates the brain and creates an inner pathways really doesn't help us when we go out and we're upset about something, right? So we're going to talk about from the perspective of consciousness, from the perspective as a physician, but basically looking at what it really is to us individually. So hopefully that's helpful. So let me just define it as it's defined. Consciousness refers to the state of being aware of one's thoughts and feelings. The more we are self-aware, the more we can consciously influence our thoughts and feelings and respond in a resourceful way to help others. Resourceful way is so important because if we think about it, basically our lives are one big conversation. Conversations with other people, conversations between countries, between citizens, conversations between ourselves, that voice inside of us that we're going to talk a little bit about today, basically, and understanding what that voice is and what it's doing. So if we look at awareness, basically, we're looking at a flower pot here, right? Or a plant pot. That's a vase that we're looking at. And when we look at it, it's pretty clear that's a vase because we're the subject. We are the observer, and that's the object we're looking at, or subject-object relationship. So we look at it, and it's irrefutable. That is a vase. It has a plant in it, and there's no question about that. We don't really argue with that. So if we look at how that works for all our senses, we have five senses, five sense organs. Basically, I'm going to use the one of the eye, but when we see that plant vase, we actually see it. We see it inside. It doesn't need to be translated. We don't need to say, oh, that's a vase and it's probably this big and that big. We look at it and we see everything we need to about that vase. Bird chirping, we hear that. We have ears that conduct that sound energy into our brain, and we hear it. We specifically hear it. Cookies baking, man, that smell used to drive me crazy. In fact, it still does. My girls know if they if they bake chocolate chip cookies, I don't want to be in the building because, man, they are great and they bring back childhood memories. I was a football player in high school. My girlfriend used to make chocolate chip cookies, and they'd be warm, and I'd smell them on the night before the game. And so there's a lot of memories that would come with it. So I'm pretty much, it's kind of like AA for alcoholics. It's something if I'm around them, I'm going to eat them. So I always ask them, and they do that sometimes, I think, just to mess with me. But also lemon basically taste, right? The lemon has, you never forget the first time you have a lemon, that tart taste that you get that identifies with it. And of course, a hot plate Hopefully it's not too hot or we get burned, but hot plate when we touch it. So basically, these are pure form things we see. We're aware of them. We're conscious of them. Now, consciousness in our inner world is a very different thing. If you think about it, events, people, something happens, and basically what happens is it comes into our brain and it's filtered by our brain, by our mind, because our mind doesn't think we can handle reality as it actually sits. So our ego takes over and is kind of in charge in that, and it creates thoughts, it creates emotions and feelings, and we get this cognitive emotive loop, and we start thinking. So let me give you an example. Let's say, Sally is walking by, your friend Sally, and you haven't talked to her in a while, and you say hi, and she doesn't say anything back to you, right? It could be that Sally basically didn't hear you, or Sally might have been deep in thought, because we all get into our inner thoughts, our inner voice. And all of a sudden, your ego takes over and says, how dare her not say something to me? Now, we have two mechanisms, and we'll talk about how that works to our advantage in just a moment. But those two mechanisms are designed. One is fight, and one is flight. Those are the two main. We can also freeze or fall. That would be the other one. Those are what animals do in nature when they have a real threat. They do one of those four things to protect themselves. Well, the same thing, that's what our ego does. It does one of those things. So fight, yeah, you may run after Sally and say, how dare you, Sally, not talk to me? And now your stuff, all your garbage inside of you, now you're getting into her garbage, and you have a discussion, and it could turn into what the next thing is, the drama triangle, and it usually does. That's why 95% of the world, 98% of the time, are in the drama triangle. It's kind of how the world's run right now, and it's not a very pretty sight. So basically, and then what happens is, if you suppress it rather than go fight, and you flight from it and you put it away, you start thinking about it more and more. And then you start projecting, well, Sally, how dare her do that? And then, the next day you're on a Zoom, you see Sally on the Zoom, and by now you're so upset, you can't even listen to the speaker, because your thoughts are consuming you, and your thoughts aren't you. That's how we filter reality. So if we look at this, basically something happens. What am I making it mean? We do this all the time. We make things, and our ego thinks it has to interpret it in a way and narrate it in a way to make you more comfortable with the world around us. That's why we want the world, and why the fixed mindset, and we want the world to be a certain way. So hopefully that makes sense. The other part is that voice in our head just starts churning in our thoughts and our feelings, and it creates cognitive emotive loops. And that's why when you lay down, because of all the stuff that happened, usually most people don't sleep well. In fact, I can't, it's unbelievable how many friends I have and people I know that really talk about their sleep. And that's what it's happening, is you're not going to sleep because you're not shutting off all those gears going in our brain. So it's, and so what is that voice in our head? Well, it's mental dialogue, right? How much of it is true? Very little of it is true. In fact, we make stuff up. And actually, I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago, and they were telling a story, and I actually used the story last weekend. But basically, the husband, the wife was in love with the husband. They love each other, and basically the wife was trying to get a hold of her husband, and she noticed a couple of days before, when they were out at a party dancing, that he seemed to be attracted to this one woman and dance with her. So she already had the voices going in her head, and she didn't address it. She could have addressed it on the way home, but she didn't. And basically she started building up inside. So like 3 or 4 days later, she's trying to get a hold of him, and usually he answers this text, and he can. And during the day, the voice is saying more and more, well, I wonder, and then it builds up, and eventually, is he having an affair? And she's really going, right? She's really going inside. And so when she gets home from work, she goes in and she's ready to tell him off. And as she walks in the door, the lights are off. She goes, what is going on? She's even more fearful. And then the next one, the lights go on, and her husband had spent the day getting ready and had planned an amazing birthday party for her. And everybody's there was surprised. And that's why he didn't want to talk to her, because he was afraid he didn't have a good poker face. So basically, or sound. So he didn't think he'd get away with it. So anyway, all day long, her voice in her head is telling her stuff that's made up. It's not only wrong, it's incorrect. And it's actually, if she listens to it, it puts her in a place where she's going to be attacking her husband in the next moment, which is then going to build up his stuff. And then we're going to be in the drama triangle, right? We know we do this every single day in so many ways. And it's lying to us. It's not the truth. But yet the next morning, we're back listening to it like it, You know, it's okay. If your friend did that to you, or your child did that to you, or someone else, you would no longer be reliable. Yet that next morning, we're using that same voice in our head for financial advice, what clothes we should wear. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So it's just so important to know that it is made up. Most of life will unfold in a way that are forces outside of you. And the mind has a lot to say about it, but has very little it can actually do. So with that, let me use this as an example of how the brain, why this happens. It's like a tea kettle. Something happens and we builds up and it builds up. And then the voice in our head starts processing and interpreting it in a way, basically because we can't handle the truth. Our ego doesn't think we can handle the truth. So it makes it up to make it more palatable. So here's a cute little puppy, and we all go, ah, isn't that cute? And we feel joy because there's nothing cuter than a cute little puppy. But if in the next moment behind you, you were in a park looking at that puppy, there was a rattlesnake that showed up and you could hear it, you would immediately, as soon as you heard it, you would jump out of the way. You wouldn't turn around and use your regular mind and your thoughts and look and say, oh, I'm curious about that rattlesnake. Bottom line, it has interesting colors. It's got this thing on the back going like this. I want to know more about it. No, you've already moved 10 feet, 20 feet. You might have run half a mile before you stop, right? Because that's how we were programmed. We have the limbic area in our brain that instantaneously creates emotion, which is energy, which gets us the heck out of the way. That's how we were designed. Unfortunately, most of the things we deal with in the day now in the modern world is not real threats. They're perceived threats. And the ego loves it, man. The ego is in charge, doesn't want you to think. In fact, for many people, the ego is so ensconced in that conversation that we're not opening to listen, to be curious to anything. We're pretty much, the ego tells us how things are. We've made a belief system about it, and this is the way the world can be. And if the world isn't like that, basically the ego is going to build more stories of it. So hopefully this makes sense. And we have fear, and fear runs throughout us. It's almost always security, anger, or fear are the main emotions that take us down the rabbit hole. So basically, if we look at that, we have two worlds. One world is the calm world we have when we're fully conscious, when we're not allowing these cognitive motor loops. That's the beautiful woman with the sunset, fully observing that, and in that moment, feeling very connected spiritually to, you know, whatever is important for you, but feeling that energy of being part of this crazy planet that's, you know, turning around quickly in the middle of nowhere, and we're connected to all that, versus this unbelievable geared up system that's just churning out all this info and all this stories, and we're making up stories left and right. What we want to do is we want to work, and what we're going to talk about and we're going to answer questions today is, how do we become unfiltered where we're not making up stuff? Because when we really find out, we really look and where our issues and problems, it's not outside of us, it's inside us. We are our biggest critic, and that inner critic, that voice inside. Now, you can have thoughts, normal thoughts that you have, like, oh, I better remember to take my keys, right, when I go out, or I better remember to turn off the stove. And those are all things that help us. So the voice by itself is not the issue. It's when we turn the voice with our ego to be this critic, the critic or voice inside of us that just gets us going and keeps us really not being present very much of the time. So if we can focus on that, it will really make a difference. So I want to use the analogy to a river and to a stream. So if you look upstream, it's calm, and that's a default mechanism for our brain. Our mind should be calm. We should rest on a calm mind. And if we think of water as the analogy, when there aren't rocks in it, you can see where there's starting to be a few rocks here. The rocks cause the eddy. The rocks can create this turmoil. And sometimes it's just a little bit like we're wondering, you know, boy, it better not rain tomorrow. I mean, who do we to think, because I'm going camping, it better not rain tomorrow. Who do we to think we have any control over that? We have no control. And actually our meteorologists don't give us such great advice all the time either. So then we blame it on them. You know, so the whole thing is, we don't want to take ownership. We want to look outside of us and see what we can fix, because we think inside of us that basically that we're okay. Our ego, even if you think you have guilt, you have anger, you have any of these emotions, they're all these rocks, these conceptual rocks that did service and they're pure if there's a rattlesnake, but don't service because we happen to look and somebody didn't say hi to us. Very different situation. And basically, if we think about it, it's calm, and the rocks are what cause the turbulence, the disturbances that are inside our mind. And as you can see, we try to navigate these cognitive emotive loops. And, we don't have a kayak. We basically just have ourselves drowning in this. And what happens is we try to do it. And once we try to do it, if we get caught in that cognitive emotive loop, once we're going down the rabbit hole, it's too late. So the key thing, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, the key thing is to recognize when you have that icky sauce, when something doesn't seem right, and you want to, we use stop, challenge, and choose. It's a tool that I kind of evolved almost 2 decades ago to help people when they start to sense there's something going on, before they're even conscious of it, they stop, they basically recognize, and they find out what the emotion is, what the thought is, and then let it pass, recognize it's not you. It's just like that vase I showed earlier. It's a thing that's different than this. And if you don't really believe that, just think, if it is me, then how come I can see it, right? Because you can't see yourself, right? So basically you're removed from it and it's not you, and your emotions aren't you, your thoughts aren't you. But if you're going down the rabbit hole, you're in trouble. So the key thing is to get out of the rapids, because you can't give yourself advice when you're upset, when you're into that upset state, because if something's bothering you, you can't give yourself good advice. So the key habit, the micro habit we're going to talk about here, is getting out of the water. It's literally getting back. And, I love to use children because children have childlike curiosity. It's wonder. They don't really care. They just want to figure out what's going on in front of them, and the joy they get out of doing that brings them so much. They love, think about when they have a sleepover and they're with other friends and they're getting to do things they haven't done before. They stay up all night talking because it's so exciting for them. It's not basically getting out and just sitting there. It's getting out and observing everything around you. Start taking the rocks out. That's the key part. So how do we do that? Well, there is no one giant step, but it's a lot of little ones. And it's taken, however how old you are, it's taken you that long through all those experiences, all those things, all those conclusions you came to, all that stuff you made up. It's got to come out, and it's going to take some time. But if it went down, in other words, what we do is we suppress that. We actually suppress it many times because we don't want to deal with reality. And so that thinking about Sally basically goes down in there. And then depending, it could be a relative, it could be someone you met that you haven't seen in years. And it creates all kinds of disturbance, not just in our own mind, but in our relationships, in our work, in our ability to be successful of what we want to do. All of it is involved, and it's all introspective, looking inside. So the first thing we want to do is start thinking about, okay, my thoughts, my emotions, and the form. What I mean by form, that vase, I'm looking outside at the water. Those things are not me. Those are things I'm observing. Pure consciousness is me observing those things. And the better we can get it, recognize our thoughts aren't our own, our emotions aren't our own. We have basically elevated them to kind of take the world outside of us and make that the problem. And that's why we're in the victim mentality. And that's why we feel like we're a victim to all the things around us. So taking full control back is actually getting to the point where you can observe your thoughts, observe your emotions, and observe, obviously, the external world. And just like I showed earlier with the woman looking at the sunset and seeing that pure image across your brain, we are able to calm our thoughts, quiet the water, and put ourselves in position where we can have wonder and fun, just like kids. And actually, it is such a powerful thing if we're willing to go to the mental gym every day. Over time, we can make all the difference. And actually, to the point where nothing's too big. No rocks are too big. Once we get them out, you can be surrounded with stuff outside of you that cause dysfunction. And we certainly have, life gets in the way. And the idea is something's going to happen, right? There are events that occur. It's how we respond to them that determines the outcome. So if we're able to get back to the point where we can keep ourselves calm, if we have issues, we address them, feel the emotion that comes with it. Obviously, if we lose a loved one, we're going to be sad for a while, and we're going to grieve, but recognizing that and not having it fully consume us by releasing it, by actually releasing it, feeling it, sensing it, releasing it, not trying to suppress it. It's where everything starts. And what I like to call this is we have internal stability, where we're able to take that information coming in, and then external equilibrium means, in essence, We have our relationships, we have the things that happen to us, and we now conduct ourselves in a way that creates an outcome that actually allows us to continue to work on our health, and work on our well-being, work on our relationships, and working on our success, whether it's in our business or in our relationships or in a relationship with ourselves. So hopefully that's helpful. I'd like to open it up now for Q&A, and Rachel, why don't we take the stop the share and let's answer some questions.
All right, we have Shauna Molina. Can you come off mute? Perfect.
Hi, Shauna.
Hi, good morning, Dr. A. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I have been, a little bit before I started program, I was digging into my, I guess, conscious work, which was so profound that this is something we're focusing on. And I'm learning, I can see myself learning in the shift happening where those, especially in the mornings, I wake up and I'm like, the list is so long and I get overwhelmed. So I'm flipping the script early in the morning and, telling myself we're going to have a great day. And, these aren't life altering things that we have to be done. But I'm also getting into, there's a lot of subconscious work yet to be done. And what are some things that you can recommend? So some things that I found are like with Ram Dass or the Abundance Code. And I want to get deeper into that because I think there are some root things that I started believing early on, and I don't know how to find them and to get rid of them.
Great. Awesome. That's a great question, Shauna. And congratulations on doing this work. This inner work we do on ourselves, getting inside our inner self and really working on it. Most people are afraid to do it. And the ego's there, man, it's just resisting. So recognizing that relationship you have with your ego, eventually over time, we want our ego to be in service of our soul. And what I mean by that, I read that several years and I always thought that was very appropriate because in the Eastern religions, they talk about totally exercising your ego. But I think your ego is really important once it's serving your soul authentically, what you really want, not the voice in your head, but really is important to you. So it's now starting to make that change. And that change occurs by how you interpret experiences. And so really, we have a whole bunch of experiences. And so when I showed the filtered versus the unfiltered, if you can actually spend some time, and so there's three ways that you can spend some time. The first is turn that inner critic, turn it into positive energy. So for instance, I used the analogy over the weekend to the leaders. So someone's driving in front of you and they're driving 35 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone. And we all know what starts happening in our minds, right? And, if you can't cross, if you can go around them, great. If it's the dotted lines, it's not a solid line, then great, go around them. But certainly don't let your road rage get like what happens a lot nowadays. It just shows you how out of control that inner voice is, where people zoom in front and put on the brakes. Instead change it and say, oh, maybe that's an old person. Maybe that's someone, and you know what? It's really cool that they're out and I understand. And just, do I really need that extra 2 minutes it's going to take to get where I'm only going down the road 2 miles to the grocery store? Do I really need to be there 2 minutes earlier? Is it okay that this lady or guy is having enjoying themselves and being safe because they happen to be older? So first thing is turn it into something positive, not make something up just because we're saying this is a stupid person. What are they doing on the road? Just change that. We can flip the script in our minds just like that once we become aware of what we're saying. The second part is a mantra, just something rather than, I showed the gears, all the different gears going, like you said, you have all the stuff going on in the morning. What if we just had a mantra in the morning to get up and say, you know what, I am calm, or, or God, abundance, whatever. Yeah. It's just something that resonates with you and say it. And if it resonates with you, you get in harmony and that energy starts cycling. And what it does, that's not meditation. That's not the lack of thought, but you've now taken it down to one thought. And as one thought, all the other thoughts will quiet. They'll kind of go into the noise in the background. So that's a nice way to kind of wrestle it. Then the third way is just surrender to it. Let it go, right? Let it go because it's not serving you. There's no way it's serving you. It's not serving you at all. It's just making you miserable and churning you up. And by the way, since, I started down the path you were talking about, we're spending more time. Yeah, because over 20 years, leaving critical care and focusing on health and well-being, it started with people being overweight and needing to lose weight. But the real core is emotional mismanagement. It's actually how we conduct ourselves with that inner critic inside. And if we can get to the point where we can quiet and look, and also, by the way, if you have beautiful things you can look at, stop during the day. A great way to test yourself is actually sense your breath. Is your breath slow, deep, coming from your belly where your belly goes out? Or is it frenetic up here in the upper chest and it's shallow? That'll tell you, because your autonomic nervous system, which is really most of the time automatic and autonomic because it's in charge and it works behind us. We don't have to think about our breathing, but we can. And our breathing will do two things. The first thing is it's a diagnostic. It tells us whether we're stressed, whether we're having all these feelings and tense, or are we calm? And then the second part, you can actually use your breath as one of the solutions. You can actually take some slow centering breaths, making sure your belly's expanding, feel the breath all the way through. And then you're using your breath to come to grips and then eventually wrestle your emotions and the things that are going inside to help quiet you and put you centered. Because we want to be, I showed the one slide with thoughts, feelings, and a form. We want to actually remove ourselves from those thoughts, being able to stand on the side, just like that little kid in the rapids, to the side and become in wonder. Oh, I wonder why I'm thinking that, right? And the idea is we're not about psychology. We're not about becoming psychotherapists. This isn't that. Psychology is about the study of human behavior, which is dysfunctional because of all that stuff. That's not our role. That's not our job. We're not trying to fix that. We're simply looking to observe it and quiet it. And the only thing we have control of, people would love, I always tell people, the best gift you can give yourself, stop trying to have a better past. Also, stop worrying about the future. Yeah, lead from the future so you have a blueprint and a direction to filter your everyday actions to become more. So do you want to be upset with your coach, or do you want to help that coach be more successful to help us on a mission? Of course, it's the second one. But if we're not standing out of the river and we're still in the middle of the rapids, we cannot function at a high level, and we do stuff. Just ask the people on Murderer's Row, right? There was a moment right before they committed these heinous crimes where they could have stopped. They were all aware of it, but their emotions, they let it take over. You know why? It's like habits. If you're not practicing, and in that moment, once you go down the rabbit hole and you're really in it, it's hard to navigate. You just can't navigate. And that's when you drown and do bonehead things. That's when you eat M&Ms. That's when people drink too much, they do drugs, whatever it is, they do something to try to quiet that voice inside, but it never does that. Is that helpful?
So helpful. Yeah. And I look forward to just getting more into that subconscious level. Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, you don't need to clear your subconscious, but if it comes up and something hits you, right, you get that trigger, you want to sense, what is it? Anger? Is it fear? What is, and then basically let it come up, and it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. If you repressed it or suppressed it because it was painful, when it comes up, it's going to be painful as well. But if you recognize it and stand on the riverbank and let it happen.
That's the surrender. That's the surrender.
That's the surrender. That's the surrender to it, and let it just go through you, and don't let it have any energy. Don't connect to it. If you don't connect to the thought or to the emotion, you just simply observe it. It can't take you into the drama triangle. Basically, you've taken back total responsibility, and you're looking at it as being a thought or an emotion, which is no different than this phone. They're things that we're observing. They're not us. Our pure consciousness, our inner self, our basically self-awareness, when it's pure, unfiltered, makes your days brilliant. And it's a process. It's probably the hardest thing you'll have to do. It's also going to make that beautiful mountain view with the calm water that we showed earlier.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, who else?
Okay, we have Stacy.
Hi, Dr. A.
Hey, Stacy.
Hi. I have a question on, as we are working through all of this personal development, and we're working on trying to stay above the line and bring awareness.
First of all, I have to stop you right away. Language is everything. Stop trying to stay above the line. Stay above the line.
Stay above the line. As we are
go,
staying above the line.
when you go below the line, recognize it before you get down, like in those rapids where now you've lost it, right? So as soon as you see the first ripple, you see that's time to move off the river, right? I'm using a metaphor, but basically stay away from it, look at it, observe it, okay? And being above the line is consciousness. You're a conscious, I want to make sure they're all related. I use consciousness because that's you as an individual. The commitments and what the Defner group did, Jim Defner created, was a line to show us as leaders or leading ourselves or being around other people. Are we above the line or below the line? It's as simple as that. That location, we're always in one of those two places, right? If we're above the line, we're just like we were just talking, then you're removed from it and you're able to see it, and then you can shift yourself with your breath, with your posture. So then you shift back out of it. You don't go down. Once you get in the drama triangle, it's like being in those rapids. You can't, it just happens and you can't. In fact, the best thing you do then is get the hell out. Stop what you're doing. It's just like, I was talking to the folks over the weekend. It's like a young kid and you're teaching to read. Do you have kids?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Okay. When you were teaching to read when they were little and they're going to bed and they're reading their book, before they go to bed, as soon as they make a mistake and they get a little frustrated, stop. Because what'll happen is they'll make more mistakes, because what they're doing is they're circling the rabbit hole. They're starting to have those things. I'm not worthy. I'm not good. My mom's going to be upset with me. All that stuff starts. As soon as that happens, stop, give them a big kiss, tell them you love them, and put them to bed. That same thing we have to do with ourselves. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to make sure right from the beginning, you're not saying when you're trying to be above the line, you need to recognize, and you may not be ready. You may not be ready to go above the line in this particular thing, but be curious about it. It's okay if you're not. 80% of the time you want to do it, but you're not willing to do it. So it takes time. It takes effort. It's just like, chocolate chip cookies. I basically, if they're warm and they're in the air, man, I have to get the heck out, because if they're sitting there, I'll find that I've got one and I'm eating it and I don't even know I went into the kitchen and got it, right? Because our subconscious, we were talking in the last person about Sean, about your unconscious part, right? We have a ton of stuff we've gathered in there, right? And most of it just isn't true. And so the things that we didn't like, we press them down inside, and they're like a coil. And if you're not careful, you trigger one and it'll come up and it'll just take over the whole conversation. So anyway, what do you really want to know?
Well, that actually probably answered my question. Now, I was wondering, when there are so many other people around you who are in the drama triangle and cannot seem to find their way out of the drama triangle, it gets wearing, trying to, being the person who stays above the line when everybody around you is stuck in the drama triangle. And I'm wondering if you have some tips to help navigate that.
I do. I have a really good, it's called, it's not mine, but it's Upset Technology. It's using, okay, how do we calm this brain that the voice is, it's like a tea kettle, right? It's just building and building and building and building. And the mind doesn't want to take ownership of it, right? When someone's in the drama triangle, they are unconscious, and they don't even recognize many times they're in the drama triangle. They actually are so caught up. And what happens is that thought, their consciousness is now connected to that thought, and they're no longer conscious. They're unconscious, because when they're conscious, they would see that. In fact, one of the most important things when you're working on yourself, and you're now at the point where you've learned the habits of transformational change and leadership and the things that are necessary, you'll actually find you'll start laughing at yourself when that ego tries to come up and do that stuff, because oh, why do you think you need to be heard right now? Why not listen? You know what I'm saying? So it's called Upset Technology, and there's 4 questions. Usually we use 3, but I'll give you all 4 questions you can do. So to that person, first ask them what happened. Okay. What did you expect to happen? What was missing? And what's next? You can take any emotionally upset, charged person, and by asking those questions and in wonder, not in judgment, in wonder of why, I'm curious what, you could even say that. I'm curious, what happened, or why, what did you expect to happen differently? And you do it from a sense of not judgment. Because if it's in judgment and they're down there, so the questions have to be really reflective questions you're asking, right? But if they answer those 4 questions, you'll feel that pulls you out of them out of the drama triangle and has them refocus because they can't even think. It's like, the Jerry, I keep saying, I don't even know if it's on TV anymore, but the Jerry Springer show where they would get on and tell each other off and really go at each other because it juices them. They get their stress response. They get that fight mechanism going on, right? And so they feel alive during that period. What they don't realize is they're tearing their body up completely. And they're basically turning their mind up and they're ruining their relationships and creating dysfunctional surroundings for themselves. We have when we take full responsibility and full ownership, basically, we now bring the locus control inside. And at that point, then we can help do it in a rational form, right? Being above the line conscious for your creativity, for collaboration are critical. In any time you're with somebody or working in a group, if it's about you can't truly be collaborative and creator. You're really more focused on showing up and being right and proving we're right. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Good, awesome. Okay, who else we got?
If you'll come off mute.
Hi, Dr. A.
Hi, Julie, how are you?
Good. Thank you for doing this. It just means the world to us. But here's my question. I'm very much a creative individual. I create decor and everything imaginable, use things out of context in good ways, and I'm known for that. And I think I live above the line much of the time. I just reread Element 24 this week, those 4 levels of consciousness. I respond, I don't react, pretty even, good with people. But the problem comes at night. I feel like my subconscious takes over. We just moved from Pennsylvania to Virginia, so big life change 3 months ago, my business, things like that. But I find myself waking up in the night with sometimes even panic and terror and these elephants sitting on my chest. And it's not rational, in my mind. During the day, I can handle that. I can choose to go above the line or silence those voices. But at night, it seems like sometimes they come alive and just really get me, and then I can't sleep. What is your thought on that as far as, is there other people like that? And what is my best bet to even out the nighttime too, so I sleep better?
Yeah, and this is a good time for me to say this. I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm a physician that's focusing on helping people create health and well-being. So I can't give you a diagnosis, but I can give you some things to think about, right? So you are really good. You're really good during the day. I think of concealing all your stuff. I think you're actually concealing your stuff because when you sleep at night, there's a relationship between your conscious and unconscious self. Sleep is just another form of consciousness. So you're not Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You basically have those things in there. You just have done a really good job of suppressing them and pushing them and resisting them. So you don't give them any energy. But basically, you still have those things, and you're just seeing them when you don't have that master control where you're basically, so if you're, and the reason why I say that's probably what's going on, because if you don't have this stuff inside there that does that, because you're doing so great with your consciousness, then you wouldn't have it because it's experiential. It's just that at night, you don't have the caretaker, the strong caretaker that has strong will and suppresses all these things and resists these things is coming out. So you actually do have them. So what I would do is now in the day, start doing exactly what I said for everybody else. You're just like, we're all, by the way, I've been working on this for several years. I'll be working on it for the rest of my life. But I can tell you my relationships with my family, with my kids, with my mom and I used to fight like the cats and dogs. She hasn't, she isn't on this course to change, and she's, in her age, she's in great shape and has a good life. But we become extremely close over the last 3 or 4 years because we used to do this and now I don't do that. And so she has nothing to do with, and so it's dramatically improved our relationship. So I think you're fooling yourself, Julie, and you're giving me permission. And by the way, again, 2 things. You're giving me permission when you get on here and ask that. So I hope that was all right. I should have asked you first.
No, that's fine. A couple things is sometimes it turns in a really good way when I'm creating at night in my subconscious, and I come up with like, oh, that's what to do with that. And it just, even for my team, in Optavia. And the other thing is, it's been a stressful time these 3 months, especially with us moving and the doubt that's created as far as, can I keep this thing going? But that's a really good way. I'm reading quite a bit on books on the mind just
Good.
to shore up that area, but I'll have to think further on that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, before you go there, Julie, two other things you said, I want to make sure, because what I like to do is give people perspective, because you can't see yourself, and to have a different perspective, so you can start becoming that observer and really watching that. So a couple of things, if it's just happened in the last couple of months because you just moved, if it's not normally there, then that could be the reason why. So I didn't know that information. So that, you did say it, but I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah,
it
no,
could
it's
be-
not like for years. It's
Yeah.
certain.
Yeah, so
Right,
that's,
stressful.
well, but it does bring up, there are things that you have security issues, safety issues. There are things that probably, I talk about expanding the window of tolerance. Most of us take two tacks. We're either rigid and we keep things very much the way they need to be. And then on the other side is reactive, where we just kind of react to everything around us. Now, I want to make sure the voice in our head isn't a bad thing, as I said earlier, and also, when I talk about the model morning and the twilight hour is a great time to think about the things that you leading from the future of what you want to create, next week, next month, next year. And then what am I going to do tomorrow? Right. So when you think about it at night and put it in your thoughts, those thoughts then sit inside there and they percolate. And so when you get up in the morning, you already know what you're going to do. You've already thought that through. So you don't have what we call choice fatigue. You're ready to go. You know what needs to happen, and you focus on the process of getting that done during the day. So that's the first, and you are a creator. And when you know what your desired outcome is, right, and where you are in current reality, you get into that generative spirit and you get stuff done. So you've got lots of the creative process in you. What I want to focus on is have you, with the creative process, focus on fully becoming filter free, where you're removing yourself and you're actually experiencing everything. And you can start off small with things. Since you like to create, we really observe and make sure you're looking at it like directly. Like I had over the weekend, I had the folks look around the room. And when I looked out at the room, I see the whole room. I see everybody. I see all the different outfits, the faces, the smiles, or sometimes the frowns if they don't like what I'm saying. And it's all right there. If I have to filter it and go through and look at each individual, it would take hours to process that room, right? So that's the difference. So you probably aren't even aware that you're filtering some things. Like maybe you're feeling a little nervous of where you are, or you're feeling a little uncomfortable, or you're feeling a little shy. It usually is we're bringing it back something inside. And then what your brain's trying to do and your mind's trying to do at night is just work through it, right? It's trying to process through, just like when you think about things creative and then next day you're ready to go. That's why I like the shower or going for a walk on the beach with yourself can be a great time to free ourselves, so we don't have all those voices in our head and we're fully getting back to that awareness. We're experiencing that. And then if we're aware what we want to create, then it gives us the right format to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you. It's very helpful.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay, who else?
All right, next up we have Margaret.
Hey, Margaret. You're muted.
Oh, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Okay, can you hear me now? Sorry about that. This is great stuff. Thanks for doing it. It's really something to practice every single day. So I'm curious, you gave that analogy of the river, which is a great visual, and there's the calm part, and then there's where the rapids begin, right? And so I'm curious, why is it in some areas of your life, it's easier to stay like that, the calm river, and kind of be in a state of flow? But then in other areas of your life, maybe day-to-day tasks, working your business or whatever, accomplishing tasks, it's a little bit more challenging to be like that river and calm and just organically flowing, because there is a huge disparity for me. So when I'm active, or if I'm whatever, mastering a athletic sport or whatever, I can go to someplace else in my brain where I find it more challenging to do that on a daily basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's really simple. It's your stuff. It's not touching your stuff. If it's touching your stuff, then your ego is going to take over and create a filtered version and make a story out of it. If it's not touching your stuff, so if I say to you, 2 + 2 = 4, does that touch your stuff?
No.
No, but if I said, Margaret, bottom line is, you're not gonna like this, but Margaret, I really missed you last weekend.
Yeah, I missed you too, by the way.
Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. It touches your stuff. Okay. And I'm using that as a real life example because that's what happens. It touches our stuff, and we shouldn't let it touch our stuff. We should take it and wonder, like, okay, why did he say that? Right? Why did he say it? And I'm actually doing it for two reasons, because I did miss you last weekend. And the second thing is I know that would touch your stuff. So that's the point. And our stuff, it's all made up. Just like I talked about the lady that was jealous about her husband because she happened to see him dancing at a party with, they were just hanging out and it meant nothing to him. But the day when she couldn't get a hold of a man, it started touching her stuff. And jealousy is our stuff. It's our emotions and the things we have inside us. And by the way, why does it affect us sometimes and not others? Because along the journey, there's stuff that happened that you've suppressed that's down there. It's just looking for a reason to come up. And it just reinforces. That's why, people in the same family can basically just go at each other because of different political views, right? Or finances. And 50% of marriages end up because of finances. I was telling the group over the weekend, in 1929, executives, CEOs of companies, brilliant people jumped off of skyscrapers because it touched their stuff in such an impactful way, they couldn't deal with it. So it's all about that. So anytime it's touching you, just be curious about it. And again, the reason why the water is calm is there's no rocks in it. When the rocks is your stuff. And when your rock is in the water, it's going to cause the wavelets getting to be rocks. And sometimes they're huge boulders, right? To get in the way, like when something catastrophic, happens to you, right? So bottom line is, all touches your stuff. And as soon as it touches your stuff, the job is to, again, stuff happens. It happens to all of us. We're all born and we die, and all the people important to us are born and die. And, we have COVID come out of the middle of nowhere, right? We have this stuff happen. It's how it touches us. Now, I'm not saying, listen, if you lose a relative or a loved one to COVID, you're going to be sad. And I'm not saying that. It's not a naivety. It's that I'm going to now say, I'm sad, I'm grieving, but I'm not going to let it overwhelm me. There's sadness, and then there's depression, right? There's where we let it consume us because we have all those gears going, and they start building that drama triangle. Oh, woe's me, and all of a sudden, rather than, we still spend time on our stuff from when we were a child, right? It's not helpful. That's why I say, stop trying to have a better past for any of us. I'm not talking about you directly. I'm just talking about in general. And then when we have something, be curious about it. Say, oh, that rock, and and then not trying to fix it, but to experience and let the rock come up, let that thing come up, and basically experience it, feel it, go through the pain, because then it's gone. And it's the same way when we're coaching other people as clients or coaches, is we need to become better at not trying to get them to be a certain way. We need to be an investigator like Inspector Clouseau, where we're finding out, okay, we don't want to touch their stuff. We want to free and create rapport and security and safety where they feel open so they can start working on that stuff with us. That's the whole idea. Does that make sense?
It does. And so just so I make sure that I have clarity. So on a day-to-day basis, when you feel like the stuff, and by the way, I had a fabulous past, but in your day-to-day.
Wait. So you just made a statement, that's your ego. Because bottom line is, you had a fabulous past in general, but you've had things that created emotions that you probably dealt with by partially suppressing. We all do. I have a fabulous past too, but I had some big issues happen. So I just want to make sure how we talk to ourselves. Okay, because you're a competitor, right? And that's your ego saying you had what judges whether you had a fabulous past or and I know you had a great mom, so I get that part. That's not what I'm saying. But stuff happens to us. I remember my father was in the Air Force, and every 3 years we had to travel. So I would lose all my friends and have to go make new friends. That touched my stuff, right? I remember being in Gibraltar on October 31st on Halloween. In Gibraltar, they don't basically celebrate. Well, they do now. Everybody celebrates Halloween now, but they didn't back then. And I remember sitting out on the balcony of our place overlooking the Gibraltar, overlooking the Mediterranean. And over to the left, while I was feeling sorry for myself, I had my stuff touched. I wasn't able to dress up and be with my friends for Halloween because we just gotten over there. Bottom line, I look over and there's a Barbary ape looking at me and making this goofy sound while he's eating a piece of fruit. And I basically looked over and thought, wow, that is really cool. And immediately I said, you know what? I have the opportunity, and turning it, like I said to the other lady, positive, and looked at it and said, you know, I have a real ape I'm looking at right here versus going and making up Halloween. So see what I'm saying? So it's understanding we all have stuff and we all go below the line. It's not so much about going below the line. It's that we catch ourselves and we start working on the habit of transformation where we're now getting beyond it. We're getting, so we know the only problem we ever have. And by the way, that voice inside our head, it always has a problem. It's always got something going on, and you can't fix something outside. You got to go inside and work on yourself, not on the outside. Now, if you know, you've heard me say this before, but if there's a leak in my ceiling and the plumbing's got a leak, then yeah, I need to, you know, stop what I'm doing, go up, turn off the water, call the plumber, and then go back and not ruin my day with, oh man, it touched my stuff. I feel so sorry for myself today. Instead, say, good, I'm glad I caught it and I was sitting here, because if I hadn't been here, the whole place would have been ruined, right? So turn it into a positive and then basically deal with it and get on with it. We all have our stuff. It's how we handle our stuff.
Right, right. So on a daily, from a day-to-day basis, because I just want to be clear about this. So when you kind of feel like you're getting into that rough water on a daily, day-to-day basis, like let's say working in your business, right? You start to think about something, that emotion wells up. Are you saying just be aware of it? Don't connect with it, just kind of be aware of it?
No, yeah. The answer is yes and no. And what I mean by that, you don't want to connect and associate with it because it pulls you right down the rabbit hole. And once you're in the rabbit hole and you're in the drama triangle, you're done. You can't give a crazy person advice. And you're no longer rational when you're in the drama triangle. Okay. So what you want to do is be aware of it, observe it, be curious about it, and let it pass. It's just like a cloud in the sky.
Okay.
It's there and then it's gone. You don't attach to it. Right. And it's not psychotherapy. You're not trying to figure out the meaning of how it affected you when you were a child. You're simply, I have an emotion right now. It's been suppressed in there. It's got to come back up. So that's why I said the most advanced, you start with just turning into a positive thing. Right. It's the first thing. Second thing, mantras help. The third thing, the more difficult one, the one that takes longer and will come over time as you practice it, is surrender. It's actually letting it go. You know, let it go. Right? If there's some person that's bugging the heck out of you, basically, you know, if they're open for it, but if they're unconscious and not open for it, let it go. Don't let it affect you. Don't let it occupy any of your time.
Okay.
You're missing, you know, I'd be missing, you know, I'm doing an hour focused attention to something that's creative, what we're doing here. But when I'm done, I guarantee I'm going to go for a walk on the beach.
Okay.
Like you do many times, right? Because I want to be outside, and that recentering to nature is so important for that.
Without a doubt, the most important. Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that and appreciate this as a gift. Thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome.
And
Okay.
I missed you too, by the way.
Okay. Who's next? You had to say that, didn't you? You had to say that. See? That's your ego. All right. Who's next?
Okay, we have Dominique. Who's next? Can you come off mute, please?
Hey, Dr. A, how are you?
Dominique, how are you?
Hi again, right? So yeah, this has become my favorite part of being a coach. But my question for you real quick is, and you kind of answered it a little bit already in the previous, but anyway, as we are transformational coaches, we're not weight loss coaches any longer. That's way, way back. So obviously we ask our clients, you know, what's going on? What's in your mind today? And a lot of, you know, I can sometimes feel that they're really getting into a spin tail. So what I've been doing with them, and I kind of would like for you to see if you have any other suggestions, but it is what you taught us in the life book. You know, I have them ask them, what do you feel? What emotion? Where do you feel it? In which part of your body? And then breathe through it. So that's kind of my way of helping them a little bit, because we're not psychotherapists, right? So, but Is there anything else? Because it doesn't seem to stick always. I wanted to teach it to them so they can do it on their own.
Right.
But next time it's the same scenario and the same scenario and the same scenario. So
Yep.
what would you suggest is kind of
So, yeah, so those are great questions. And I want to say a couple of things. I want to say once again, and I probably should put it up in the front, we are not psychotherapists, none of us. Even though I'm a physician, I'm not a psychotherapist. I have not been trained on psychotherapy. Basically, that's not my specialty. And actually, my specialty now is helping people create better health. It just so happens that one of the things that we can create is a healthier mind by knowing some techniques and things we can do and a better understanding, because knowledge, doing, and becoming allows us to change our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. And and so none of our coaches, and so this is not intended for that. This is intended, and by the way, this is not just for coaches. This is for everybody. I built this forum because then I'm going to be having on, especially starting next year, I'll have on thought leaders in this space that aren't part of our program, because so for your clients, a good thing is to get them on these calls, right? Get them on these calls, because they can maybe learn something they can't. Maybe they're too close to you, or and the other thing is, you can't get them. You can't change. I want to be really clear. You cannot change someone else's behavior. All you can do is make them aware and present, and basically stop, challenge, and choose, right? So with that, the best thing you can do is become a better model of it. So when they start seeing every time they're on the call, basically, you don't have to agree with what they say. You just are acknowledging it. That's part of building relational health. You're acknowledging where they feel safe and they're not being judged. And then they'll start opening up. In fact, you'll become the area where they'll talk more, because everybody else is taking them down in the drama triangle. So they may be excited about having a conversation with someone else, but they're being enabled. They're not being empowered. As long as you don't take the bait, right? So never take the bait. And eventually, after 3 or 4 times, and that's what my kids learn this. They know that they have a problem. They can come to me, but don't turn it into a major Megillah, a major issue. We'll deal with it. What happened, what was missing, what did you expect, and what's next. I've always done that because it's so critical. And what you're doing is, after a while, they won't start, because they're not going to get satisfied. It's just like, if you're teaching, I don't mean this to be derogatory, but it's stimulus and response. If you're teaching a dog how to sit, you use a reinforcement, right? You use something, a reward. Same thing here. The reward is that they actually feel that anxiety go away, because you're asking rational questions and you're not taking the bait and going down the rabbit hole, like I was talking to Margaret about. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really
Thank you so
important.
much.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, we have time for maybe one more question. We're almost at the hour.
Okay, we have Katie up next.
Okay.
Katie.
Hi, Katie. I can't hear you.
Hi.
There
Hi,
we go.
thank you
There we
so much for all this.
You're
You
welcome.
actually answered many of my questions with these question and answers, but I do have a question. Why do our brains almost immediately go to make stories that are negative, and they like self-sabotage? Staying above the line, working on that consciously, but my brain and many of my clients' brains immediately go to the negative, even though we're staying above. But why? Why are we? Why are we
because I
wired
showed,
that way?
if you remember back, did you see my slideshow?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the
So remember
fight, the fight or flight. But how do we? Why is the fight or flight? I just answered my question. But
So,
how do we get the fight? How do we stop it?
Okay. Well, okay. The reason why it happens, everybody, that's your programming. You are programmed that way. It's there. The only way you make it, so to ask yourself, why do we do that? Because it's the natural process. It's 10,000 years ago, we lived in a pretty hostile environment, and there were a lot of bad things, saber-toothed tigers, cliffs, poisonous plants, all these things. And so we were attuned to be a highly evolved neural tripwire. Our amygdala are our neural tripwire. They're designed so when there is any perceived threat, boom, it acts in advance of you using your rational brain, because our rational brain is more deliberate, but it thinks much slower. That's why emotions are full of energy. That's why they create all that angst inside us, because normally physiologically, one of those four mechanisms, whether it is flight, you release norepinephrine and epinephrine and cortisol are all released, and you use those things to fight somebody. And actually you vasoconstricted, so if you did get cut or hurt, you didn't bleed to death. So they're all built into our program. It's like, you know, why when I take my Tesla to the gas station, try to put fuel in it, it doesn't work, because it's a different fuel source. So you were designed to be protected against any real dangers. What's happened today, we live in a world that's extremely complex, technologically advanced to the point where we don't use relational skill sets like we used to. Kids stay on their phones. You watch people at dinner, they're all sitting there on their phones. No one's talking to each other. So we don't use a lot of, so it's getting worse and worse and worse. And we're getting to a point where most people are closing down. They're suppressing anything that's new. They're putting it down and having more and more angst. And that's why we're having drug overdose, why people are eating everything that's not nailed down. It's why the alcohol consumption during COVID went up so dramatically, because people don't know how to do this. So that's why you do it. Okay. Now, how you change it is a process. You have to be highly motivated. I can tell you, most people actually enjoy the adrenaline rush when they go to work and it's dysfunctional, because they feel competitive, they feel in the game, they're trying to be better than someone else, and it makes them feel alive. But it's the worst thing they could do. And that's why you have 50-year-old widowmakers happening all the time, because they're stressed out completely. They're eating the wrong foods and doing all the stuff that's not good for their health or their mind. So to work on this, we have to get back first with self-awareness. The key part is self-awareness, being able to be the observer and recognize that almost all the time your ego is going to take over and try to narrate the world with its own story that serves you. And it's a very negative story, because negative bias is already there. People tell 33 people something negative. They only tell 5 people something positive. Okay.
Wow.
We have a negative bias of perceived threats, and the world is full of perceived threats. And we're not getting the socialization and the interaction like we did years ago when, you know, your grandmother and grandfather, if your parents were working, they were there for you. We lived together, we worked together. Technology, we didn't move around. We just like the one lady that basically is having stuff happen at night because she moved. Yeah, she made a move, but the world is moving. I made a statement over the weekend. Change is occurring the slowest that will ever occur right now. It's going to continue to accelerate. So if we're not taking control, and AI, by the way, has come on, and what companies are doing is they've data mined millions and millions of people. They know what you're thinking, and they're actually having you work for them and buy their stuff because you're not thinking, because you're unconscious. So this is the most important gift we can give to ourselves and work on together. And that's why I wanted to start this forum and this movement and bring others on also, because this work is so important for us individually. It doesn't matter whether you're a coach or a leader. It's important for our clients, and it's important for everyone to realize, if you don't take back that locus of control and you continue to point outside at everything as being the problem and trying to fix the problem, rather going and looking at the mirror and realizing that you are the person that's causing this stuff to happen to yourself, and your thoughts, your feelings are not you. They're just another process where you have a neurological thing that happens that we can harness and build buildings and, you know, make amazing airliners and all this stuff when we process our thoughts in a collaborative, creative way. But when we're left to our inner critic, we basically beat ourselves up insensibly, worse than we would ever talk to anybody else.
True. We're our
Cool.
worst critics. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, guys. Well, listen, again, thank you, guys. I hope that this is helpful. And again, we've designed this for anyone that wants to work on organize their life around what matters most to them, that wants to be able to put their mind where they want, when they want, for as long as they want. And together, we really can help ourselves and help our fellow humans be better parents, more conscious parents, community members, citizens, and obviously help us change the world together. So thank you guys so much. And I'll see you in January on the first Tuesday at noon. See you guys. And let anybody know, this is for anybody that wants to work on themselves. Thanks. Bye.